It's once again time to jump into what has gotta be one of the best series on this channel, the weird Marvel and DC fusions. And since it's been 1 year since my last Spider-Bat video with Spider-Bat Let There Be Carnage, I figured this is a perfect time to do an episode dedicated to fusing two of the best rogue galleries in the history of comic books, Spider-Man and Batman villains. I've already done a few of these in other episodes, but I've never done a full episode dedicated to just weird Spider-Bat villains. So that's what today is. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's go. Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. The streets of New Gotham are often under siege by a myriad of villains, ranging from your average street-level crook to the maniacal and sadistic killer, Arthur Cassidy. Luckily, the city has a resident hero who always fends off even the worst of the worst villains, the Spider-Bat, aka Wayne Parker. He's a hero who regularly takes on villains who appear to be punching way above his weight class, and yet he always eventually finds a way to outsmart or outbrawl them, somehow even besting someone as powerful as Max Carlo, more commonly known as Clayface. Carlo had grown up always wanting to be an actor. He loved movies and theater and craved to perform for the masses. But his father refused to pay for any schooling that had to do with the subject. He said the only way to make an honest living was to learn a trade. This was only a minor setback for Carlo, though. He went to school and became a lighting technician to work on movie sets. While he wasn't getting to act himself, he was at least near the action, meeting the right people and paying for his own acting lessons on the side. At every turn, he'd try to talk to producers or executives about getting shots as extras or minor speaking roles, but was rejected at every turn and told to stay in his lane. Until one day, someone from the camera department on the set he was working on told him that they were shooting an indie project on the side and were in need of someone with lighting skills as well as acting skills. Max thought this was perfect and agreed immediately, before knowing just how dangerous the job would be. The project was being shot with a tiny crew for one of the first scenes, and they broke into a chemical manufacturing compound. The lights Carlo had been given to set up had fraying wires and were not up to any production code. But he didn't care. He was getting his shot at the limelight. He started by climbing a ladder above the various vats of chemicals being brewed to hang one of the lights. But as he got the first one in place and plugged it in, it sparked and shocked Carlo. He slipped from his perch and tried to grab the light for balance, but it just fell with him. He plunged straight into a thick pool of clay-like chemicals that burst into an eruption of electricity as Carlo and the fraying lights struck it. The entire factory lit up in a glow, which caught the attention of everyone in a mile radius, including a certain spider. The film crew fled as Carlo tried to pull himself from the sparking muck, which surprisingly seemed to be getting easier and easier. Soon it was like all the goop had disappeared, but that wasn't it. The viscous chemicals had absorbed into his body. He looked down at himself and his new form had altered into a massive mound of sparking electric clay. He lobbed his fist forth and easily punched his way out of the vat, then out of the factory, stumbling around trying to figure out what was going on. Spider-Bat, along with a news helicopter and a crowd of approaching civilians, saw a monster lumbering from the facility and immediately assumed the worst. New Gotham had a new villain. Spider-Bat sprung into action and Carlo's new chaotic form began firing off bolts of lightning that seemed like attacks, so Spider-Bat fought back. And as the two brawled, Carlo noticed the crowd of onlookers and the newscopter. He wasn't acting per se, but he certainly had an audience and was ready to put on a show. Still not knowing much about his new body, he learned as he went, firing electricity and even shifting his limbs into clay hammers and clubs to swing at his foe. People cheered and cried as they watched the scene unfold, and Carlo reveled in it. He eventually stuck Spider-Bat to the ground with a giant glob of clay and fled, yelling, "Till next time, Spider, when once more you'll be bested by the villainous Clayface." Carlo thereafter used his role of villainy that had been thrust upon him as a way to frequently be in the spotlight of New Gotham. He'd find ways to challenge Spider-Bat in public places and drink in all the cheers and jeers of an enthralled audience. But quickly, Spider-Bat would get too good at defeating Carlo, who'd end up imprisoned in Arkham Croft, far from his audience. And so, a genuine hatred started to build for the Spider, and he swore to end his foe in an epic final battle and make it the performance of a lifetime that no onlooker would ever forget. Norman Freeze had much less humble beginnings than some of Spider-Bat's other foes. He was raised in a wealthy family and would grow up to create FrostCorp, New Gotham's leading technology innovations company. It was a place that Wayne Parker had always considered working at someday in his high school years, and luckily he had an in with the head honcho. Wayne was good friends with Norman's son, Harry Freeze. The two would often visit FrostCorp together and hang out in the ambiance of a bustling, innovative hub of science. Until Harry got sick. Wayne tried to stay updated on what exactly was wrong with Harry, but Norman was keeping the whole situation very secretive, simply saying his son had an unknown illness that couldn't yet be cured by modern science. A month into the ordeal, Norman announced that his own son had agreed to be put into a prototype cryochamber, where he could be frozen to halt the growth of his illness until a solution could be found. Wayne wasn't permitted to see his friend before Harry was frozen, and the whole situation felt incredibly suspicious to the young hero. He donned his costume one night and snuck into FrostCorp to try and get more information. He spent many nights looking through computers and files trying to piece together what was wrong with Harry, and eventually the whole horrifying story fell into place. Norman had made his own son sick without his knowledge so he could show off the company's cryotech, then reveal a cure a year or so later that they already had prepared to further show off their innovative prowess and try breaking into the medical field. But Wayne wouldn't allow his friend to be a guinea pig or a poster child for the company's fake triumphs. He broke into the cryo facility to free Harry, but Norman was there working late. Spider-Bat confronted his friend's father as his alter ego, and Norman tried to fight off the Spider to no avail. Enraged by Norman's actions, Wayne punched him far harder than he should have, and Norman sailed into a wall of vials that shattered all over him. A cloud of mist and frost burst around him, and he choked on fumes as his veins began to pulse blue. Spider-Bat stopped his assault and took the man to the hospital. Even in his rage, he had no intention of killing someone, especially his friend's father. But the next day, Norman was out of the hospital, appearing totally fine. He masterfully spun the story to seem like Spider-Bat was a treacherous villain, trying to sabotage the company's work. He buried all evidence of his actions, and Spider-Bat was back to square one. He once again tried to break into FrostCorp, but when he got close to the building, he was struck from the air by a cannon of ice. Soaring around the building was an icy, cackling goblin of a man on a glider that spewed ice rays. The chemical cocktail that had spilled over Norman had given him the ability to transform at will into a frigid foe with enhanced strength and speed and a body as hard as ice. From there on, he'd use this form to conduct all manner of corporate sabotage against rival companies, while using his wealth and position of power to keep all connections between Norman and the villain invisible. The only person who knew the truth was Spider-Bat, who swore to one day bring Norman to justice and free Harry from his frosty prison. Just a quick mid-video interruption to say that I finally have a new PopCross Comic Cascade shirt up on my online store, along with lots of other posters and ink bundles and stuff like that. But this new shirt has a bunch of my best artwork from the last little while, including some cool Marvel and DC stuff on here, like from my Marvel Combat episodes or Marvel Dragon episodes and stuff like that. It'll be linked in the little bar beneath this video. Check it out if you want a cool new shirt. Also, if you do get one, buy a size smaller than you normally would because they come kind of big. But anyway, sorry for the interruption. Let's get back into more Spider-Bat stuff, shall we? Weylan Sitsovich had been labeled a freak most of his life. He'd been born with a minor metahuman alteration that did little more than make him odd-looking. He had scaly skin and sharp teeth, but no powers to speak of, so all his metahuman genes did for him was get him bullied growing up. Even his parents were off-put by his appearance. It was hard for him as a boy, but as he grew, he developed thicker skin, both on the outside and inside. He began using his appearance for intimidation, helping work his way up New Gotham's criminal underground. He bulked up to make himself more menacing and became a goon for hire. This position worked for him. His appearance had become somewhat of an asset, even if people in his line of work did still call him a freak. But eventually his job would get much harder as New Gotham's first protector, the Dark Norseman, would start putting away waves of criminals, including Weylan for a brief period. When the Dark Norseman would leave to work alongside the Avenging League on bigger universal problems, Weylan would think his troubles were over. But of course then, the Spider-Bat came into the picture and would once again get Weylan put behind bars. He needed to be stronger and better. He needed a way to defeat the Spider-Bat once and for all to keep his criminal career on track. Luckily, while locked away, he met someone who could help. Pamela Octavius, a brilliant and treacherous villain of the Spider-Bat. She manufactured a prison break where she and Weylan and many others were able to escape from Arkhamcroft. She then took Weylan to her secret laboratory where she told him she could enhance his meta-genes, evolving his abilities to make him far more powerful. So long as he did criminal work for her first and foremost, she'd make him the strongest villain the Spider had ever faced. Weylan was in. She brewed up a chemical concoction and scraped together a machine to embed that concoction into him. She even used Rhino DNA to help ensure he'd develop even thicker skin and make him even tougher. And when she finally used her creation on him, he did certainly evolve. He grew bigger and bigger till he was over 8 feet tall with massive arms and shoulders. Horns sprouted from his forehead, and his strength and durability increased many multiples what they'd been before. He became a hulking beast that the media would eventually dub the Killer Rhinoc. And the first task from the woman who altered him was to kill the Spider-Bat. Weylan, in his altered form, would certainly be a much more formidable foe to the Spider and nearly kill him on their first encounter, but Wayne Parker was crafty, and like with every other villain he'd face, he eventually found a way to best the Rhinoc. This was enraging for Weylan, but only a minor setback in Pamela's plans to kill the Spider. She simply wanted to see how Weylan would fare on his own, and this trial would only further prove something that she'd suspected. No single criminal could defeat the Spider. It would take a team. A sinister group with an aligned goal to rid New Gotham of its precious protector forever. Felicia Enigma grew up watching her father's renowned criminal career. Walter Enigma had no power to speak of, but was still able to pull off some of the most elaborate heists in New Gotham's history. He taught Felicia that if you have brains, you can outwit any bronze. She grew up actively training her mind. She thrived at completing puzzles in all forms and always challenged herself to complete them faster and faster. She was a brilliant child who skipped many grades as she grew, all while being more and more inspired by her father. She got through university in a breeze with perfect grades and could have had any career she wanted. Her father had been trying to push her to get a proper job, though. The criminal life had worked for him, but he'd been pushed into it at a young age and simply made the best of it. He wanted Felicia to live an honest life. But when she was fresh out of school, her father, the brilliant criminal mastermind, was finally bested. Walter had mapped out an ingenious heist against a wealthy and shady politician, Wilson Dent. But halfway through the job, Walter was captured by the Spider-Bat. Parker had been scoping out Dent and keeping tabs on Walter's career, and while he still had much work to do before taking down Dent, the Spider-Bat was finally the first person to outwit Walter Enigma and put him behind bars. This was initially infuriating to Felicia, but eventually became intriguing. Upon visits to her father, he'd say that he wasn't surprised he'd finally been caught by someone and was impressed by his adversary. Felicia got more and more obsessed with the Spider-Bat's work and wanted to see just how clever he was, and prove that she was even more so. She ignored her father's advice to lead an honest life and started setting up elaborate riddles around the city for Spider-Bat to solve in a limited time. If he figured out the solutions, they'd lead him to a heist that she was undertaking in time to stop her. If not, she'd get away. She reveled in this challenge and never saw Spider-Bat as a true enemy, but a competitor in the arena of the mind. And she never enacted crimes that physically hurt anyone, so while Spider-Bat did always try to stop her, he never put priority on locking her away over some of his more deadly foes. but eventually something would happen that would pull Felicia out of her games. Her father was killed in prison. It had appeared to be just a prison brawl gone wrong, but the man who'd enacted the crime was a known goon of Wilson Dent. Even though Walter's heist against Dent hadn't been successful, Dent had still been embarrassed by how far the crook had gotten, knowing full well that if Spider-Bat hadn't stepped in, Walter would have gotten away with it. And so, he had Walter killed. This pushed Felicia over the edge. While toying with the Spider-Bat was fun, now she had her mind set on using her brains to kill Dent. This was when Spider-Bat finally had to put more effort into locking her away. He wasn't a fan of Dent either, but knew that killing him wasn't the right thing. He needed to prove Dent's criminal actions to the world, to have him locked away and make an example out of him. This is how the Riddle Cat became a proper villain to the Spider. One he was always conflicted about stopping, but who he knew he'd eventually have to put behind bars. You know what? I'm gonna say it outright. This is, art-wise, the best Marvel DC Fusion episode yet. I love how this one turned out. I guess I didn't draw Spider-Bat, which I've been doing every year on the channel. So do people still want me to do that this year? I mean, I don't think he'd turn out that different from last year. I really liked how last year's drawing turned out. But maybe I could and include some other heroic Spider-Bat characters. I don't know, let me know what people want in the comments. And of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure to check out a bunch of the other videos in the weird Marvel DC Fusion playlist. I've probably got like 12 videos on there by now with like Avengers and Justice League fusions, X-Men Teen Titan fusions, and of course there's last year's Spider-Bat Let There Be Carnage. But besides that, that's all for today. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I will see you all in the next episode on Monday, and I think that's gonna be a good one too. Anyway, goodbye everyone.